Good morning. I'm Ward 1 Councilmember Brianne Nadeau, the Chair of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. Today is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024, and I'm calling to order this meeting of the committee to conduct a public hearing on B25-922 and B25-924. The time is 9:33 a.m. Today we'll consider two bills. B25-922, the Strategic Parking Enforcement Enhancement Act of 2024, and B25-924, the Opening Worker Ownership, a New Economic Resilience Strategy, or Owners Amendment Act of 2024. The first bill for consideration today is Bill 25-922, the Strategic Parking Enforcement Enhancement Act of 2024, which I introduced on July 12th of this year. The purpose of the bill, as introduced, is to establish a reimbursable detail program for parking enforcement modeled after the existing Reimbursable Detail Officer, or RDO, program that's a partnership between MPD and ABCA. The agencies describe it as a popular public safety program that enables alcohol licensees to hire off-duty police officers to patrol outside their establishment and at special events for a discounted rate. As we've been working to expand DPW's resources and staff capacity, a priority I know Director Spriggs and I share, I saw the RDO model as something worth proposing to strategically enhance parking enforcement, as the bill title says, particularly in recurring hotspots like nightlife corridors. There are some blocks and neighborhoods that feel like they need constant vigilance to properly enforce parking regulations, make the curbside work the way it's supposed to, and contribute to safer road and traffic safety. This bill is meant to create an avenue for DPW to be able to devote resources to problem areas in a way that doesn't further tax overall agency resources. I'm looking forward to hearing from our public and government witnesses today about how we achieve that, whether it's through this bill or other proposals. The second bill up for consideration today is Bill 25-924, the Owners Act. This bill was introduced by Councilmember Parker on July 16th, 2024, and directs the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection to survey the district business ecosystems and co-create a citywide strategy for incentivizing and help district business owners sell to their employees. I will now turn to Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker for remarks.
Thank you, Chairperson Nadeau, and thank you for holding today's hearing. Today we'll hear testimony about the Owners Act, the legislation I introduced to direct the district's Department of License and Consumer Protection to survey our business ecosystem and work with relevant stakeholders and agencies to co-create a citywide strategy for incentivizing and helping district business owners sell to their employees, a process called a worker cooperative conversion. In a city of skyrocketing costs, it has become all too common to see community businesses close. And for many of these businesses, they aren't hearing from the city about alternative ways they can stay afloat. This is an opportunity for DLCP, who is the only agency that every business in the city touches, to do some outreach, learn why businesses are struggling, and then work with other stakeholders and agencies to explore how the district can support them more effectively. Evidence suggests that cooperatives where employees own a business together can be more resilient than traditional business structures, even in economic downturns. And the district has a rich history of cooperative economics. Mayor Marion Berry made cooperative development a key feature of his economic development strategy, including a commission on cooperative economic development. Cooperatives and other forms of economic democracy have been key tactics of Black economic liberation and survival in the district and beyond. This legislation would set the district on a trajectory to reinvigorate Marion Berry's economic legacy by building wealth directly within the communities that need it most. Unfortunately, I have to jump off the Zoom soon as I juggle other commitments today, but my staff will be tuning in and taking notes. I'm encouraged by this hearing as a chance to begin the process of learning more about the needs of local business owners and their risk of closure, and beginning to co-create a community wealth building strategy to protect local businesses and expand cooperative business ownership as a strategy for long-term economic resilience. Again, thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, and I'll stick on for a little bit, but looking forward to today's hearing.
Thank you, Councilmember. Just some logistics for today's hearing. In addition to Zoom, the hearing is being live broadcast at brianneknadeau.com/live. In order to ensure we hear from all members of the public, I ask that all witnesses stick to their allotted time. There is a clock in the corner of the Zoom. Witnesses testifying on behalf of an organization will have 5 minutes to provide oral testimony, and all other witnesses will have 3 minutes. When it is your turn to join the panel, you will receive an invitation to be promoted. You just have to accept that invitation, and then you'll have access to your camera and your microphone. We encourage you to use both during your testimony. And we'll now turn to our first panel of public witnesses. Santiago Lakatos, Commissioner ANC 1B04. Kenyatta Robinson, President and CEO of Mount Vernon Triangle SID. Jamila White, Commissioner ANC 8A05. And Mark Eckenweiler, Commissioner ANC 6C04. We'll begin with Commissioner Lakatos.
Good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, Councilmember Parker, members of the committee. My name is Santiago Lakatos. I'm an ANC Commissioner in ANC 1B, which covers the U Street Corridor, where I also chair our ANC's Transportation Committee. In my work as an ANC Commissioner and chair of that committee, one of the loudest and most frequent complaints I receive is around the lack of persistent enforcement of parking regulations in the U Street Corridor, which gets a large number of visitors on a weekly basis. Councilmember Nadeau, you're very aware of this as the ward council member, as also having spoken to you about it in the past. This has been at least somewhat mitigated with the creation of the Nightlife Task Force and the surging of agency resources in the area, additional DPW enforcement, additional booting and towing. And while that surge is appreciated, and I would hope it stays, given budget constraints and the nature of changing demand for resources, we do need a more permanent recurring solution for that enhanced parking enforcement. And so in collaboration with the creation of the performance parking zone and the future neighborhood management entity that will be funded by it, the need for that dedicated enforcement actually I suspect will grow. But also the neighborhood management entity will be one of the entities eligible under this bill, which I'm actually really excited about, to provide those reimbursable details. So the bill would allow us to address that need by having the entity fund the details, the reimbursable details, especially because I suspect that the zone itself might initially attract more illegal parkers. So folks who come to the area who weren't used to paying, like a reasonable rate, and now they don't want to pay it. And now you need parking enforcement officers who are going to be going out there and actually like more persistently enforcing, I wouldn't say like meter enforcement because they're not meters exactly. While I'm not actually sure if this can be written into legislation, I would encourage DPW to consider booting and towing crews as a part of those details, just given the outsized safety impact they also have in the area, not just, the financial effect of, preventing someone from, parking in an area we're not paying or parking in a residential parking area, but also, people who have $10,000, $15,000 worth of tickets for going 20 miles over the speed limit, who tend to be up from out of state and tend to actually visit the area. It's actually one of the hot spots that the DPWs, I think they were calling it the hotspot program, was targeted at. And again, I'm also not going to dictate how an agency deploys resources, but would encourage that if the details are deployed to the U Street Corridor as a part of that future neighborhood management entity, that it not lead to the agency deploying less resources than it normally would. So, we're going to end up taking a subsidy and then not doing it otherwise. I'm not saying that would happen, but in case someone was thinking that, please don't do it. And I urge, yourself and all other council members to support the swift passage of this bill. I'm suspecting the next council period, given it's December. But I would really encourage this to, hopefully get done in the beginning of the next council period, hopefully able to, whatever, I don't know what the FIS is, but fund it in the next budget cycle. Considering we would be giving DPW money, I hope it would too high of a FIS. But thank you for the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Robinson?
Good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, and to you as well, Councilmember Parker. My name is Kenyatta Robinson, and I'm the president and CEO of the Mount Vernon Triangle Community Improvement District, one of DC's 12 business improvement districts that sit at the intersection of the public and private sectors, strive to serve as an effective catalyst for growth and improvement, and advocate on behalf of the interests of our stakeholders and the public at large. We work to enhance the overall quality of life for residents, employees, business owners, and visitors in the Mount Vernon Triangle neighborhood of downtown Washington, D.C., activity that also benefits areas just outside of our formal boundaries. And despite not having any formal governing authority, we do often convene those who do in support of solving our community's toughest challenges. It is in that light that I come today to share my perspective on B25-0922, Strategic Parking Enforcement Enhancement Act of 2024, to establish a Department of Public Works reimbursable detail program for parking enforcement officer assignments. While my first preference would be to utilize the parking enforcement officers we already pay for through the city's budget before purchasing a reimbursable detail, I commend your effort to find innovative and creative ways to provide a service that is desperately needed along our city's busiest commercial corridors, including multiple blocks in our Mount Vernon Triangle community. Some years ago, I suggested to a former DDOT director an idea for enhanced parking enforcement through bid personnel like our clean team, whose wages will be offset by parking ticket revenue, resulting in better enforcement at no cost. So the need for a new approach has been apparent for quite some time, and hence my personal interest in this matter being discussed today. To understand why change is so desperately needed, look no further than Square 562. Bound by K Street Northwest to the north, High Street Northwest to the south, 4th Street Northwest to the east, and 5th Street Northwest to the west, the parcel has just one point of entry, 4.5 Street Northwest, for the 965 housing units and multiple ground floor retail establishments that require vehicular access for trash pickup, bulk deliveries, or simply to get into their garage after a long day of work. At any given minute, during any given hour, on any given day, one could witness repeated incidents of drivers and other vehicles pull into the alley, throw on their flashers, exit their vehicles in support of food and other deliveries, in many cases returning nonchalantly to their car as residents sit waiting in cars backed out as far as K Street for them to leave. Though as soon as those cars clear, that another driver who undoubtedly has witnessed this behavior pulls up and does the same thing. And the cycle continues, in large part because there's no disincentive to do otherwise. The same can be said for the pickup drop-off or PUDO parking on a 400 block of K Street Northwest Superblock. Designed to provide 10-minute parking for food delivery and pickup, rideshare, and other quick-turn activities, these spaces are rarely, if ever, enforced. As a result, drivers receive valuable all-day parking at no cost, and the capacity these spaces are supposed to free up for other vehicles in need of short-term space never materializes. So where do drivers who would use these spaces park are then relegated to parking in a street, which poses an issue of traffic safety, or you guessed it, the aforementioned 4.5 Street alley, and the cycle continues. I would be remiss if I did not use this opportunity to advocate for two additional measures. First, grants and other subsidies should be made available to help the eligible entity pay for this service either upfront or as a split of the proceeds from parking enforcement revenues. The district government should also consider broader adoption of technology such as cameras and license plate readers to provide this service more consistently than traditional enforcement methods. Because while people can't always be in all places, the eye in the sky never lies. Such an approach could be piloted in Mount Vernon Triangle for proof of concept and is consistent with the goals of the Downtown Transportation Plan as articulated by the Downtown DC bid and Golden Triangle bid in the Downtown Action Plan. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to testify today. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I don't believe we've been joined by anyone else on the first panel, so we can just jump right into questions. We can do, let's do 5-minute rounds. Commissioner Lakatos, thank you very much for your testimony. I think it was helpful to hear the way you're thinking about the different layers of enforcement and tools that we have, in particular in your ANC, whether that be the task force or the performance parking zone or the soon-to-be, hopefully, place management authority, and how this would tie in. I think that's really helpful for us to be thinking about, because for a program like this, you know, we're modeling it after an existing program, but for a different purpose. And so we have to make sure that we get it right for the people who actually want to and would be eligible to use it. So I thank you for that. And thanks for taking the time to testify. And Mr. Robinson, I know that particular alley has been such a pain point for your organization. And I'm encouraged that you think something like this might be helpful. And I appreciate the constructive feedback you've given on how to make it the most helpful possible. So thank you for taking the time to testify. Councilmember Parker, did you have any questions or comments?
I have no questions, but thank you both for sharing your testimony.
Very good. Appreciate you. Our next panel, are we going to have anybody phoning into our next panel? Do we know? Everybody's in the Zoom. Okay. All right. So our next panel includes Tazaya Dawkins, Amisha Thompson, Gary Thomas, Brianna McGowan, Charnel Cheney, Ronald Coles, Passins Leifong, Jim Schulman, Executive Director of the Alliance for Regional Cooperation, and Bianca Vasquez, Program Director at Beloved Community Incubator. believe everybody is joining on the Zoom. But if I've missed somebody who's in the chamber and is testifying, please do come to the witness table. Just give us a moment to promote everybody to the panel. Do we have Amisha Thomas? Yes. Okay, so to join the panel, we're sending you an invite in the Zoom. You have to accept the invite. Amisha, I think we need you to accept the invite on your screen so that you can join us. And Gary Thomas, the same. In the meantime, we can begin with Brianna McGowan.
Okay, good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, Parker, and all. My name is Brianna McGowan. I'm a worker owner of Redelicious DC. It's a food lab co-op where we turn food waste into delicious community. The Owners Act is an exciting proposal for the city to strengthen the roots of the idea around community wealth building and seed a robust ecosystem that will provide the enabling conditions for more cooperatively owned businesses, a proven model for economic resilience. The current economic and business development strategy, building luxury and attracting wealthy businesses and then taxing it to fund DC services for DC, cannot stand alone, especially in the coming or likely economic downturn. We need to diversify our irons in the fire and lean into cooperative economic development or community wealth building as another strategy that focuses on building the collective wealth of our people and giving us the tools to meet our own needs. Small businesses in DC are struggling. Rent has skyrocketed for our businesses as well as our residents, and many owners do not have succession plans. We need to offer them a way to sell to their employees in the communities they serve by expanding infrastructure for legal structures and entities to be created, as well as public support services like legal and accounting that are necessary for effective ownership of a business. So the city can support the entities already doing this great work too, like the beloved Community Incubator, DC Purchasing Alliance, and legal clinics. I hear all the time, as I'm sure you do too, not another luxury condo, and we need a grocery store in our neighborhood. Yet most of our city's development strategy is focusing on big businesses and big developers that don't care about our communities, really. They often pull out without any consequences, leaving our neighbors holding the bag and still stuck in a system of food apartheid and sky-high rents. We know that our Black residents have been economically displaced due to the failure of our economic strategy to uplift, empower, and give real ownership to our communities. So in closing, it does not have to be this way. We can build off the cooperative economy that Marion Barry seeded, where wealth and prosperity flow from the grassroots up, not from developers and corporations down. Let's get excited to invest in community wealth building and empower local stakeholders to pool resources and meet our own needs. Thank you. And have a wonderful rainy morning.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Charnel Shaney.
Well, I was talking and I was muted. Hello, good morning. How are you all doing? My name is Chanel Cheney, the owner of Bo Yoga. And this morning I'm going to be talking about my transition as a business owner to becoming a cooperative. As the owner of Black Yoga, as the owner of Black Yoga, of Bo Yoga, I'm excited to announce our transition into a cooperative model. Especially welcoming moms from Ward 7 and 8. This transition is about more than just a change in ownership. It represents commitment to collaboration and empowerment, which we really are about. In Bo Yoga, collaboration is super key for us and has always been key for us. By shifting into a cooperative, we are creating an inclusive environment where mothers can come together, our youth can come together, our whole community can come together to practice yoga, support one another, and share in their journeys. This model allows us to build a community that reflects the values and needs of its members. This transition will be life-changing, not only for the moms involved, but the whole entire Bo Yoga community. Together, we will cultivate a space where we can enhance our wellness, develop our leadership skills, and create lasting relationships. By collaborating as co-owners, we ensure that our programs and our classes that are catered to the unique needs of our members will promote a strong sense of ownership and belonging. I really want you guys to consider passing this bill, shifting into cooperative development. It just gives our community a different chance. We've always asked for more jobs. We've always asked for more, programs and resources. And now we're really just asking for more investment in ownership and cooperative ownership and share ownership. And thank you for my testimony. And one more thing I do want to add, we also have the Building Futures program, which with me, Damien, and LaShawn, and we have 3 of our youth from their youth co-op that we're also helping them develop, because we just truly believe that the solidarity economy is the best way to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We are going to try to unmute Amika Thomas to give testimony. Oh, there she is. Or he, I'm sorry. There they are. You may now have access to your microphone and your camera, but we're going to try to unmute you just in case. Go ahead.
I could
There you
unmute,
go.
but it's no camera.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, but we can hear you fine now. If you'd like to give
Okay.
your testimony.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. Hel- Hello. My name is Amaja, and I'm one of the owners of Grind Through Designs. I joined the cooperative because I wanted to try something new. I want to be a part of this cooperative because it gave me a chance to learn how to work with people I don't know and build trust with them. I feel like this is a great opportunity for youth because they learn how to start a business, be themselves, feel safe without fear of judgment, and learn how to work together to build bonds. You never know who knows who. Uh, I believe some of the budget should be mm, oh, allocated to cooperatives because not everyone has a resource they need. The funding could help us acquire the right supplies, ensure everyone has transportation, and allow us to earn money from the hard work we put in to build the co-op. The kitty is designed for those the kitty fund is designed for those who are struggling and need to borrow money to buy their food for their siblings or family, but they have to pay it back. I feel like the kitty fund is helpful because it supports people who genuinely need assistance. That's it.
Thank you very much for your testimony. So glad you could join us. Next, we'll hear from Gary Thomas. Gary, we're going to try to unmute you directly, and then you should be able to speak. Just give us 1 second.
Hello.
Gary, you are now unmuted. Go ahead and give your testimony.
All right, everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. So my name is Gary Thomas. I am one of the members of Grinding Through Designs, the youth cooperation. And I strongly believe that investing in youth cooperatives offers several long-term benefits for both the community and council members themselves. And in Grinding Through Designs Youth Cooperative, young people like myself, we have developed entrepreneurial skills, financial literacy, and a sense of ownership. This can also help reduce youth unemployment and stimulate local growth by supporting young entrepreneurs and workers like myself. The youth cooperative also encourages active participation from younger people in the community. Be quiet. This gives youth a chance to feel heard and respected, resulting in a greater responsibility. Young people can also bring forth fresh ideas and a different perspective as well. The last thing that I wanted to speak on was the youth cooperatives provides a kitty for any of the youths that are a part of the cooperation, and this basically helps us help anybody else that we feel needs a little extra help that's a part of the organization, or those who you might consider at risk that need it, and all our funds go back towards funding and towards our program, more supplies and stuff like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Next, we'll hear from Ronald Coles.
Good morning.
Morning.
So my name is Ronald Coles. I'm with District 1. Pretty much, I feel like co-ops have been a great opportunity for like-minded individuals to come together and build up a viable business. I think there needs to be more monetary or fiscal stimulus in place for policies in order to help out cooperatives and small businesses. So I think the Owns Act is actually a great proposal to the city. It will help out a lot of people.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our next witness, and I'm so sorry if you could help me with the pronunciation once you begin, I'd like to understand correctly how to do it. Passins Lifang?
That is correct. I mean, yes, let me correct it a little bit. Payang Lifang. Yeah.
Paying Lifang. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for, giving the time for testimonies. My name is Payang Lifang. I have been a DC resident for about 11 years now. I'm a cooperative law attorney who has worked in DC with small businesses, cooperatives, and housing cooperatives since the pandemic. In addition, I'm also a fellow of the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is a lead organization on cooperative law innovations, and I am a steward of the Cooperative Professionals Guild. It's a national professional network of attorneys and accountants growing their capacity to support the work of cooperatives. I am giving testimony today to support B25-0924, the Opening Worker Ownership, a New Economic Resilience Strategy Owners Amendment Act of 2024. That bill has two very clear and feasible goals. One is to survey the landscape of potential business closures, and two, to co-create a strategy for this city to help businesses sell to their employees and promote cooperative economic development more broadly in DC. On the first issue, I would share that from my personal professional experiences in DC in the past 3 years, small businesses, especially small businesses from traditionally excluded communities, have been struggling, and many have disappeared. They used to serve the needs of DC's diverse and lower income communities. They have tended to be replaced by either franchises with deep pockets that do not generate wealth in DC, or by fancy stores that don't cater to DC's diverse and lower income communities. When the local small business owners, the moms and pops shops are gone, the local communities lose strong pillars and anchors of e-communities. When their stores are gone and they cannot buy what they need, DC diverse and lower income communities also start to be displaced by economic hardships and a less welcoming environment. To know which local businesses may be struggling and prepare to prevent their closure would help keep DC as a diverse city where all are welcome. The second goal of a bill focusing on worker-owner conversion is the first step to a great solution to the problem previously outlined. Worker cooperative conversion is one of the safest cooperative models, as the business already exists, has a history of financial viability, and has workers already trained to operate the business. Worker cooperative conversion is the most popular cooperative model in most places around the country due to its low risks and appeal to financial institutions. Worker cooperative conversion is the lowest hanging fruit among the many cooperative business models. Statistically, worker cooperatives have consistently been cited as the most resilient forms of enterprises in times of crisis. Most larger cities have local government support and infrastructure to promote worker cooperative conversion, as it is an excellent economic development tool. Thank you for your time and consideration. I am available for questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We are actually going to try to get Tazia Dawkins into the Zoom creatively so that she can give her testimony. Let's try this one more time. There we go. Okay. Can we do a little sound check?
Hello,
Yes.
can everybody hear me?
Great, go ahead.
Hello.
You may give your testimony.
Okay, good morning. My name is Tazia Dawkins. I'm the owner for Grind Through Designs. I think cooperatives or co-ops are very important because as a cooperative, I learned things that can help prep us for the future and jobs. I feel as though we built safe spaces I can't talk. I feel as though we built space and time where we could talk and communicate with each other to build a bond and get us out of communities where we don't want to be in at times. And we have something called the kitty where we put together money where we could put in and out, letting us know that we all work together and we basically support each other through them things. I feel as though as a youth, we would have never learned these things or things that we are learning in the co-op, in a job. Things that we're learning from the co-op, we would never learn from a job or have these experiences. So co-ops are very important for the youth, especially because we learning new things. And it's not about being a boss. We all work together. We all each other leaders, and we're a family when it comes to our co-op. So I feel as though that's very important. That's all.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now turn to Jim Schulman, Executive Director of the Alliance for Regional Cooperation, who is providing testimony in person.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, for allowing an old school participant here. I, as much as I do plenty of Zooms and Teams stuff, I much prefer being in person. So thank you for still doing it in this grand room. I would say that the reason I'm here today is that among the hundreds, actually thousands of bills that come before the council every year, this one in particular, I think, is really, really important. It's about securing the long-term future, an economic future for the district and for residents of the district. And, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm pretty sure there's some pretty stiff headwinds we're going to face moving into the future. And anything we can do to strengthen our local capacity to provide basic needs, you know, food, shelter, clothing, education, healthcare, and provide those things closer to home, we will stand us in good stead to meeting future challenges. So I am very pleased to be here to support the Owners Act. And I guess I'll just say about myself that I'm an architect and an entrepreneur and active with multiple small nonprofits focused on local and regional economic development. The Alliance for Regional Cooperation in particular has worked with small local businesses, and our latest focus is on something called community visioning. And I only bring it up because I think it might be important in terms of visualizing what we want our future to be like in 50 years, that residents of Ward 1 might be interested in engaging in more community visioning opportunities. But you have my written testimony. I'm going to move to the second paragraph to talk about this bill. In November of 2023, I attended the second annual conference of SBAN, the Small Business Anti-Displacement Network at the University of Maryland. I was extremely impressed by the wide variety of strategies that are now being employed all over the region to retain and grow BIPOC-owned businesses of all types, protect them from being gentrified out of their neighborhoods, and help them build the generational wealth that has systematically been robbed and foreclosed, especially from Black communities since the abolition of slavery. One tactic discussed at the SBAN conference and other venues addresses the current demographic trend, sometimes referred to as the silver tsunami. The idea is to identify soon-to-retire business owners and convince them of the wisdom of selling their businesses to their owners, transitioning those businesses to successful cooperative ownership. After having myself participated in efforts over the years, along with the Community Wealth Building Group here in the district, to educate the Federal Small Business Administration on this matter, the SBA now promotes and encourages these kind of transitions to worker ownership. The district government should also provide incentives to smooth and simplify such transitions so that the ownership of local successful businesses can be maintained by district residents and data is available to justify federal support. And let me just insert here that this applies to all businesses. Legacy businesses that have been here for decades may be in danger in a very short period of time from closing their doors. And having the district support efforts to allow a business owner to consider this extra option of selling to their workers or their community owners is one that we should promote. And I want to leave you with this quote from Gina Schaefer, who's the former owner of a few cool hardware stores, the largest collection of cooperative hardware stores in the nations. Our exit strategies stink. If you want to exit a business one day, learn from this big mistake I made. The best time to think about succession isn't when you'd expect. It's not when you're about to sell. It's not when you make your first hire. It's not when you're in financial trouble. The time to start thinking about succession is when you start your business. I never understood that advice until I really wanted to begin my exit strategy. But for some, that's already too late. If you have exited or want to exit, when did you start thinking about it? I think heading into a new year is a perfect time to start your plan. And I say now is a perfect time for you to adopt the Owners Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Our final public witness today is Bianca Vasquez, Program Director of the Beloved Community Incubator.
Hi, Councilmember Nadeau and Councilmember Parker. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Bianca Vasquez, and I am the Program Director at Beloved Community Incubator, or BCI. BCI is a nonprofit cooperative support organization and non-extractive lender here in the DMV region and focusing in Washington, D.C. We work on building a regional solidarity economy that centers people, especially poor and working class workers and people of color, over profit. Tangibly, we provide administrative, legal, and technical support to cooperatives in DC, Maryland, and Virginia at various stages of pre-launch and operations. Our organization began 8 years as an outgrowth of a community listening campaign after the 2016 elections. Common complaints from low-wage workers included low wages, unpredictable work hours, wage theft, and abuse at work, with few opportunities for advancement or ownership. We sat with a group of house cleaners as they made the decision to start their own business as a worker-owned cooperative. A year and a half of pre-launch support and 6 years of operations later, Dulce Hogar Cleaning Cooperative is a stable business providing family-sustaining jobs in the 90th percentile for house cleaners here in the DMV. That story is particular to DC, but is not unique. Data shows that worker cooperatives build wealth for workers and provide better wages, benefits, leave, and training than traditional business structures. Through our program, the DC Solidarity Economy Loan Fund, and our partnership with Seed Commons, BCI also provides non-extractive lending to local cooperatives because we believe the benefits of ownership should be expanded both to workers and our communities. We work with workers who might not otherwise qualify for traditional lending and ensure that they are not bankrupted or crippled by automatic loan repayments or personal loan guarantees. Our goal is to use DC Self to invest an additional $1 million in local cooperatives over the next 2 years, and conversions are one of our primary strategies to achieve this. Our hope is that the city helps cultivate a supportive environment for cooperative conversions. With worker cooperatives, profits don't go to distant investors, but instead are directed by and invested directly in worker owners. And as a result, that money stays grounded in the local economy, building community wealth. In our pursuit to help expand employee ownership locally, we are inspired by the fact that if 30% of US businesses were worker-owned, the median wealth of Black households would increase from $24,000 to $106,000. This year, we launched a small conversions cohort working with Black and migrant-owned businesses here in the DMV. Many of these small businesses are long under-resourced and undercapitalized. All of the owners cared about the legacy of their business, and some want to retire, some are exhausted by the time and energy demands of sustaining a small business in a challenging financial environment, and some wanted to move on to other projects. Regardless of the motivation, the benefits to employees are clear. Employee ownership can help low to moderate income workers build wealth and assets and expand the opportunity for business ownership to more people. And as others have stated, cooperatives are more resilient during times of economic crisis than other business structures. In the district, nearly 30% of all businesses are Black owned and many are legacy businesses. Rather than closing, conversions to a cooperative can help owners retire with their business being purchased at market rate. This is an opportunity to help keep businesses rooted in the community and local economy, retain quality jobs, and preserve the legacy of longtime small businesses. We do not have to accept the large-scale displacement of small businesses. There is an opportunity to build knowledge of the cooperative model and meet the needs of owners through education and technical assistance and access to capital. BCI supports B25-0924, the Owners Amendment Act of 2024. We believe that DC should follow other cities such as Madison, New York, and Chicago, who are utilizing cooperatives as a racial and economic strategy as well as an anti-displacement strategy. We encourage the district to create and invest in a long-term strategy for developing a robust cooperative and community wealth building infrastructure in the district, and that we think it should begin by listening to small business owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I think let's do 7-minute rounds since we have a larger panel here. I think that maybe Bianca and Brianna would be best positioned to answer this, but I open it up to anyone. What has been your experience working with DLCP DSLBD, or other agencies? And what support is currently available for worker-owned businesses or for cooperative conversions?
Bianca, I'll let you go first.
I would say the first time when I sat down with Dulce with a rep from a city agency, they said they didn't think that what we were doing was legal. 8 years ago. I think that there's a growing familiarity. Most people are familiar with cooperatives in terms of like consumer cooperatives or purchasing cooperatives like grocery stores, REI, Community Purchasing Alliance, or with agriculture if they come from places where there's significant amounts of ag co-ops. I have found that there is not as much familiarity with like multi-owner small businesses. And many people do it through an LLC, just multi-owner LLCs. So when we explain that that's the process, they're familiar, but I think there's an opportunity even within the agencies to learn about the benefits of cooperatives. So it's been my experience. There's not hostility, but there's not a lot of familiarity either.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. I just wanted to insert there that I'm not going to out this person, but I do know there's a staffer at DSLBD who grew up in a family, their family was involved in a co-op. And so this person has been very supportive of co-ops. And there was like a 2-year period where DSLBD actually helped host some of the meetings of what became the Community Wealth Building Group that couldn't continue, but there are people there who understand these issues. I agree, however, with the general feeling that led to this drafting this legislation that the consumer, the Licensing and Consumer Protection Agency has the data that is needed to make this bill function.
Thanks, that's helpful to understand. Appreciate that. Ms. Vasquez and then Ms. McGowan.
Sorry, thank you, Councilmember Nadeau. I just wanted to echo that DSLBD has done some education-related events to cooperatives and highlights like learning opportunities, conferences in that regard, and has hosted some events as well as did provide the infrastructure for sort of a cooperative stakeholders group over the years. And I was mostly focused on our interactions with DLCP. But since every business does have to relate to DLCP, it does feel like who would have access to talk to owners would be DLCP.
Thank you. Ms. McGowan.
Yeah, so my interaction with DSLBD was actually through the Food Waste Innovation Grant. So some of their granting, they like went on a limb with my co-op because we're like on the fringes, we're like related to food waste reduction. In fact, we do that, but they mainly gave it out to a bunch of restaurants to do food waste and then our cooperative as this fringe case. But that was because someone thought that we would be, I think, an interesting direction to give the grant. And I think it'd be really cool to have the infrastructure where we actually seed it for cooperatives to be centered in granting for different causes, issues. I think one of the things that and Bianca and I think it was Jim mentioned this about DLCP is that because they're the agency that everyone has to go through the licensing and they have the database, they are the ones I think who can do at least the beginning exploratory mapping the ecosystem of businesses.
You know, I was surprised that Mayor Bowser chose not to send a government witness to testify on this legislation. Perhaps miffed is a better word. Especially given the testimony here today about the ways in which you all have worked together with government agencies on this issue. I don't know if anybody has some analysis on why they would choose not to send a person to testify here. I can just make it an open question.
I think I'm not speaking to the mayor's mindset, but people in general don't realize that worldwide, something like 17% of the world economy is through co-ops. It's just a much bigger deal than is well recognized.
Fair enough. I'll have one more question and then I'll turn it over to Councilmember Parker. What types of supports do other localities provide for cooperative conversions and worker-owned businesses? Go to anyone. Anyone know?
Yeah. So in New York, there is like city money that is available annually through the New York City NICNOC. I forget what the acronym stands for. But they provide like $9 million a year in terms of funding that can be applied for grants, for training, and legal support. The city of Madison focuses more on startup cooperatives, but mostly it's in the form of grant money for technical assistance. And with a conversion, you need an accountant, you need legal folks, you need lenders that are being able to actually do the valuation of the business, and you need technical assistance providers that can give training and accompaniment to owners as they actually are thinking through the process of succession and selling. So that can sometimes be a cooperative developer. That can also be like a small business person. Project Equity is who's nationally facilitating the most cooperative, like they're the leader in cooperative conversion facilitation. But those are the kinds of programs, generally it's funding for that kind of technical assistance, as well as owner education.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all of your testimony. I'm going to pass the gavel over to Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, and thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Vasquez, I will start with you, a 2-for-1 type question. One, what were like 1 or 2 of the most pressing takeaways from the incubator that you led this year with Black and Brown folk trying to bring them in or cultivate their work within the cooperative space? And then 2, as we ideally would work to stand something like this up, if you could give us 1 or 2 starting places, given that there may be pushback or just a lack of interest from the executive, like how do we work collaboratively, ideally, to stand this up, and where should we start?
Thank you. So I would say, I shared this in my testimony, I think a lot of legacy small businesses are long under-resourced and undercapitalized. So one of the things that we've been seeing through the loan fund is that and what we see through the loan fund's 36 other partner organizations across the country, is that often businesses require an infusion of capital to get stable in order then to sell to their employees. So that can be a challenge, just like the general instability of small businesses or under-resourcing that happens in small businesses. So that's one lesson I think we've learned. The second is you have to work with owners for a little while to think about what would be the conditions under which they would sell. So there's some work to do with owners prior to approaching their employees, because you don't want to approach them with an offer that's not going to happen. So that can include, do they want cash up front? Are they open to ongoing payments monthly from the business? Do they want to stay in the business in some capacity? So that sort of negotiation with owners to think about what is a succession plan that works for them. I think, so that's my first answer. The second piece of like where to start, I think we don't have like a census. So that's the part of this Owners Act that is the most interesting to me, is actually getting a map of, the businesses that exist, what's their ownership structure, and also like who might be looking to retire, or who is in corridors where there is ongoing and escalating gentrification. So I think that's one piece. And then I think that there's an opportunity primarily for education, and also if there was grant money from DSLBD to sort of fund some of that work, because owners sometimes have to contract with people to do that technical assistance or engage other organizations to actually help do the valuation of their business and things like that. So I think there's opportunities primarily for like assistance to owners. And then the second piece is once the legal conversion is complete, there's a question of like who's going to train the workers, because the workers have been doing their job and sometimes the managerial functions have been held by the owner. So I think there's training. That's another place of once a conversion is complete legally, how do you offer training and support to new worker owners of how to manage their business collectively?
Really appreciate that. And the vision behind the legislation would ideally was that we would stand up an office, a team, an agency that would incentivize these conversions with existing businesses, likely through the infusion of cash with robust support, and that there would be ongoing work with the new owners so that they could survive. I wanted to come to Ms. Lafong, if you're still there.
Yes, I am.
Yes. What are some of the legal challenges that might arise through the conversion process, and how might we get in front of that as we try to stand something like this up?
Yes. Well, I think what is always very difficult is both the legal and the accounting aspects of the conversion, because the worker owners will have to make decisions about their legal structure. There are different ways to, I guess, to put together a legal entity. As people have mentioned, it could be an LLC, it could be an LCA, it could be a GCA in DC, for example. And then when it comes to taxes, you really have to understand the advantages of both different models, but also the different, I guess, tax chapters. So in terms of, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask a quick follow-up question there, because what we wouldn't want to do is to create extensive liability for the district.
Right.
If we were the ones incentivizing these conversions and overseeing them, how might a government agency incentivize, support these conversions, but still leave the liability, the legal liability, with the owners or the business itself?
I mean, the government will always only be in a supportive role, right? Because the owners legally are going to be whoever is, listed as owning the company. I think the liability of DC is never, totally, I guess, at play just because you're just a third party. I would say, so the reason why you really want to have all the foundational, legal and I guess financial and tax support is just because the way that it begins really is going to affect how it's going to both grow but also maintain in the future. And I feel a lot about housing co-ops the same that I feel about worker co-ops or any co-ops, which is that a lot of people feel very excited about, we're getting the deal done, the building is bought, the store is bought or whatever. But the reality of it is it's only the beginning. And so there's a lot of, and in order to even have a good beginning, there should be a little bit more time to actually prepare people. But I think there's so much excitement about making the big deal happen that there's a little bit of a rush to, get to the acquisition itself or the conversion itself. And then later on, what happens is that a lot of times people who are going to actually be living there or operating the business are not ready to manage everything. And then you have so many daily tasks that are involved. There's no excitement about just the day-to-day upkeep of housing cooperatives or cooperatives in general. And I feel like that's where there's a little bit of lack there. And the fact that a conversion and a cooperative business is an ongoing process. It's not only that one point in time. So there's that understanding that people want to invest at, critical times, but there also needs to be some ongoing support, monitoring, and things like that. And eventually, when the whole ecosystem is put in place, then government doesn't need to be there anymore, because the ecosystem technically should be able to sustain itself. Yeah.
Gotcha. I am over time. Councilmember Nadeau, are we doing another round, or might I have another minute just to ask a quick follow-up?
This will be the last round, so go ahead and ask
Okay.
any questions you'd like.
Yes, I will. This is a general question. I would ask people to err on the side of brevity. And I would say one of the models my team looked at was Cleveland, that has a similar program where the government is incentivizing these types of conversions. Generally, where might you point us to look? I know, Ms. Vasquez, you mentioned Chicago and New York, but I will open it up generally. Where should we look for models as we work to stand this type of program up?
If I could briefly say, I would definitely recommend, the Bay Area, Oakland Sustainable Economies Law Center, and all kinds of entities over there that have already started things. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would suggest Baltimore and the crew at Baltimore Roundtable for Economic Democracy recently, in the past 4 years, have completed conversions of Meta Integrative Wellness, Common Ground Coffee Shop, which closed after the workers were trying to unionize, the Wine Source, a 30-year legacy business, and the owner was trying to retire, and also has worked from a conversion from social enterprise to a worker cooperative of Taharka Brothers Ice Cream. So that would be a resource and a place that I would check. I don't know the city support that Baltimore has, but while they're working on conversions, could probably share about what would be effective from the city side.
Thank you.
Councilmember Parker, just a local example that might be of interest to you is I know an architecture firm, husband and wife sold the business to their employees, but they wanted to remain involved, and they would have liked a 49 to 51% ownership model, but they ended up with a 51-49% model because they didn't have the technical supports that would have gotten them across the line to majority ownership.
That's really helpful. And if you could share with the committee the name or information of that business, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's Architrave PC Architects.
Awesome. Any last takers? Okay. Thank you all for your testimony. Really informative.
And I just want to acknowledge in the comments, Ms. McGowan has written 2 things. One, that Councilmember Parker referenced, Cleveland built a whole ecosystem for cooperative conversions and having anchor institutions procure their needs to co-op businesses. And she also said that she wanted to mention really quickly that DSLBD does great work, but they're not well situated to support this work of surveying the full business ecosystem. DLCP has the data to do this since all businesses have to get their licenses through them. Those are very helpful points for our consideration of the legislation. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to this panel for your testimony. That concludes the public testimony for this hearing. Thank you. And we will now move to our government witnesses. We will be joined by Johnny Gaither, PEMA Administrator at the Department of Public Works and Operations, Raymond Hainsworth, PEMA Deputy Administrator at the Department of Public Works and Operations, and Christine V. Davis, General Counsel at the Department of Public Works and Operations. They're here to offer their testimony on the first bill that we heard today. Thank you. And I'll have you all raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Great. Thank you. You may begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, committee members, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Johnny Gaither, Administrator for the Park and Enforcement Management Administration, also known as PEMA, at the Department of Public Works, DPW. And I'm joined by Raymond Hainsworth, Deputy Administrator for PEMA. We appreciate the chance to discuss B25-0922, Strategic Park and Enforcement Enhancement Act of 2024, and provide you our perspective. DPW PEMA understands that this bill aims to establish a reimbursable parking enforcement detail, allowing an eligible entity such as an ANC, Business Improvement District, Main Street promoters to contract for enhanced parking enforcement. These reimbursable details will be staffed by parking enforcement officers, also known as PEOs, working overtime with the eligible entities covering the costs of the enhanced parking enforcement. We have some concerns regarding the potential for inequities in enforcement under this bill. Specifically, entities with more financial resources may be able to afford enhanced parking enforcement, leaving others with fewer resources unable to access these services. DPW PEMA is committed to providing fair and unbiased enforcement across all neighborhoods in the District of Columbia. Another concern is the possibility that an eligible entity might misunderstand the role of the parking enforcement officer and believe that they can direct PEOs to issue tickets to specific vehicles. We want to clarify that PEOs, whether working under a reimbursable detail or not, enforce parking regulations strictly according to district laws and regulations, ensuring impartiality at all times. We're also concerned about employee well-being. The additional overtime required by this bill could contribute to employee burnout, which is already a concern given the significant enforcement demands for each events like nightlife, sports, and special events. Adding more reimbursable details would stretch our staff further and exacerbate this issue. DPW PEMA believes that the mayor's staff, the Mayor's Special Events Task Force, which is also known as MSETG, already fulfills the intent of the bill. The MSETG, led by Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, is comprised of 13 district agencies, including Metropolitan Police Department, Fire and Emergency Medical Services, District Department of Transportation, Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, and DPW. 6 additional federal agencies, including U.S. Park Police, U.S. Capitol Police, National Park Service, participate as necessary. The MSETG evaluates requests and ensures coordination among district agencies according to the plan for the event. The MSETG ensures both public safety requirements such as ingress and egress of emergency vehicles and regulatory requirements such as permits and licenses are met prior to the event. MSETG also ensures that agencies provide the appropriate level of resources, i.e. parking enforcement, trash and recycling bins for the event. The MSETG also ensures that the event organizers bear the cost for the services provided. With this existing structure, policies, and procedures, the MSETG is already well equipped to handle the goals of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to share concerns regarding the bill. Mr. Hainsworth and I are ready to answer any questions and further discuss how we can work together to ensure equitable and efficient parking enforcement across the District of Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Diving right in, I understand your argument that the bill in its current form could result in an inequitable distribution of resources. To what extent is that already the case, though? How much is PEMA being dispatched to areas where people are the loudest or most resourced or who submit the most 311 requests?
So all of our officers are assigned beats, so they are across the city. We respond to 311 requests based on those areas that we had not gotten to. So we cover the whole, the entire city. So all the wards are covered. So there's no inequities in the enforcement of parking because we cover the whole city.
So when a 311 request comes in for parking enforcement in a certain area, what happens next?
Within 24 hours, a parking officer goes to that location and looks for the violation.
And how effective is that in situations where the issue is already resolved within 24 hours?
Well, we say 24 hours, but of course we try to get there a little quicker than that. But if the issue is resolved, then the service request is closed out. So, but that's our service level agreement that we have with the OUC.
Mm-hmm. How often, what is the actual response time typically?
Councilmember, the actual response time, it depends on the violations. With certain violations, we created what is referred to as the rapid response unit. That rapid response unit, based on the top 10 safety violations, will respond within 2 to 3 hours at the most. Our initial response time with those top 10, we initially put in is 1 hour, but we found that that was being a little too tight. So we stretched it down to within 2 or 3 hours as far as the top 10 safety violations, such as blocking a fire hydrant, blocking an alley, things of that nature. Anything that may be a safety problem, we will dispatch to our rapid response team and respond within that 2 hours.
And the rapid response team, how big is that team?
That currently the rapid response team consists of 6 individuals. The initial plan had 10, but for various reasons, we lost numbers, and we're in the process now of recruiting more parking enforcement officers so we can rebuild our rapid response team back to the 10.
Are there actual vacancies on paper, or it's more you're trying to create a shift to put more people there?
No, we have actual vacancies on paper.
In that team in particular, or just in the administration?
Within the administration, within parking control, as far as the parking enforcement officers.
Which means you have to shift resources back away from the rapid response team to fill the other needs equitably.
Yes, ma'am.
You've kind of got a equal versus equitable argument running in my brain since that statement about having equal coverage across all 8 wards, because of course we know that parking enforcement is important to have everywhere, but also it's needed urgently in certain parts of the city pretty regularly. So what happens when a location has repeat 311 requests in the same place all the time, or even just multiple in one day?
What we tend to do is that when we receive those type of repeat requests, we bring in the supervisors and the parking officers for that area. We look at the top requests and what those parking violations are, and we come up with a plan and a strategy to make sure that we're addressing it on a daily basis with that team.
Okay. And does that usually mean adding more people to that beat, or what does it mean?
It may be. It just all depends on exactly what the violations are and how widespread it is.
What would be an example of a place that you've done that?
I would say we have done that around the Georgetown area, around the hospital, around, what's that street? Yeah, Reservoir Road, and that area around Georgetown Hospital.
Interesting. So what are the repeat violations in an area like that?
So you have meters on the reservoir, and then in the communities, you have RPP parking. So it's 2 different violations that are going on at the same time. So what we're trying to do, or what we did, is that we brought on some additional people to address the RPP issue, and also to have the parking officers to also address the meters. The meters are on Reservoir, and then you have the RPP, which is in the community off of, like, I think it's 36th Street. So yeah, we sat down and came up with a plan of how to address both the RPP issues and the meter issues.
I'm going to ask this gently. Can you give me an example of a time when you've done this intervention in a neighborhood that is less wealthy and well-resourced?
So I believe that we did the same thing over on Southwest around the waterfront. Also, I believe that we started putting more resources on Marionberry Place, and that area around there, W Street and B Street. So yes, we've looked at the areas around that area, Ward 8 also.
Okay.
Yeah.
The wharf, at least in my mind, is a little more dense, right? And I get there's hospital traffic, and that can be a priority over in Georgetown. But I'm glad to hear some other examples. So over, say in Marionberry, what was the call for that led to the supervisor coming and thinking through what a plan would be there?
So the problem that we were having was a lot of vehicles were parked over the 2-hour limit on Marionberry Street Avenue. And so, and also you also had a lot of people blocking double parking in that area because you had a lot of businesses, people going into the businesses. So we wanted to make sure that we were addressing that and moving people along. So we sat down with the supervisors and made sure that they put time into that area to make sure that that the folks who are parking there are parking within the time limit.
Do you feel like if you had more resources, you would do more of that across the city?
I believe that, anytime we have more resources, we always look at how we can utilize those resources to address that type of question. Yeah.
Because how often do you have enough resources to do that sort of special intervention that you've been describing?
So what we do is that it's as needed basis. If we know that we have an issue and it keeps coming back up, and it's something that we know that is an issue, we will sit down and determine exactly how much resources we need to place in that area and for how long. So it does happen. So yes.
So, I have all these written questions, but I like my own train of thought here. You know how much I love your work. It's a compliment, really. Okay, so walk me through this too. So you've got people working a beat. 311 request comes in. Do the people on the beat get notified of the 311 request?
Yes, ma'am. What happens first is that the 311 request will come into our dispatch office. Our dispatch office will then give it to the supervisor that's responsible for the area. Then the supervisor that's responsible for the area will give it to the PEO that they have working in that particular area.
Got it. Okay, so it comes in, it gets pushed through the line of the chain of command down to the person on the street. Is it typical that that person would then sort of, I don't know, finish up what they're doing and then go to that area? Or would they just get to it, in their travels through their beat? Does it depend on the person?
It depends on the person. It depends on what they're doing at a particular time when they receive the CSR. If they're in between, they may be traveling, say, for example, coming out of the RPP area, going into a commercial area.
Yeah.
They receive the CSR, they will go to the CSR request and then proceed on to their commercial area. So again, it depends on the individual. It depends on what specifically they're doing at the time they receive the CSR.
Can you remind me if any or how many PEOs have license plate readers on their vehicles?
Right now, we have, I believe it's 15 vehicles that have 17 that have license plate readers on them.
Out of how many?
We have about 80-some total vehicles.
Is it tech that has been helpful?
Very.
Yeah. And when I've been in one of those vehicles before, the technology is very interesting. Can you remind me this? When somebody comes across a license plate with the reader that pings or whatever, who gets that information? Is it just the driver of that vehicle?
Just the driver of that vehicle at that time. And it usually comes up, it can come up one of two ways. One, if they go to write a ticket, they may be doing residential permit parking enforcement or even meter enforcement. Once they put that tag number into the handheld, if that vehicle is what's considered a scofflaw, it will immediately come up and identify it as a scofflaw as far as how many and how much. Usually what will occur is if it is a PEO will again turn it over to their supervisor. Their supervisor will then make contact with the booting supervisor, who will then dispatch a boot crew to the location that the vehicle was called in at to see if they can catch the vehicle and immobilize it.
It's a lot of communication that has to happen to get it where you would want it to go to get that vehicle immobilized or impounded.
Yes, ma'am.
Does the tech exist that it would do more of like an APB where, a scofflaw pings and everybody who needs to know knows?
I can't say for sure that the tech does in fact exist, but I'm pretty sure that it does based on the type of technology that we currently have, and based on the type of generated notifications that occur now. I'm confident that that type of tech does probably exist, but it's going to entail some type of software rewriting and things of that nature.
Yeah. Well, I would love for you to have that level of technology for your team, because right now it seems like everybody has to work extra hard just to do the things that you're charged with doing when there may be some tech solutions that could help. So let's keep talking about that, even though that's not the subject of the bill and I've gotten a little bit off track, but I will get back on track. Okay. Talk to me about overtime spending. What is your overtime spending in FY24 and FY25 to date?
So today I have the overtime spending for FY 2024. In 2024 was $2.9 million.
Mm-hmm. And what does most of your overtime go to?
It's mostly dealing with the special events, nightlife, task force, streetcar enforcement, sporting events, and special events that come through the city, and First Amendment events also.
Do people tend to volunteer for those?
We have people who volunteer, but the pool is, because there's so many events, the pool of volunteers is not very large.
Mm.
So you mainly have the same people who are volunteering for those overtime events, and it's not always a large group of people.
Do you find that does wear on the workforce?
It does, because you have these parking officers out just about every weekend doing one of these events or doing a special event. So yes, it does wear them down.
How do you feel in general about delegated authority to other agencies for parking enforcement?
Well, we don't believe that would be appropriate in this sense, because what has to happen is that there has to be a lot of technology, and that these other entities would have to be able to use the same technology that parking enforcement uses right now, and that's a lot of technology, and it's not cheap. So mainly it would be a push.
Councilmember, may I add, it's not just technology, it's training as well. In order to be a PEO, they must complete a 9-week training. If they don't pass the training, then they're not a PEO. Then begins the on-the-job training with more seasoned officers, and then there's regular refresher training throughout the course of any year, month, or day. So it's not just the technology, it's technology combined with training and ensuring that they are issuing appropriate violations. And supervisors monitor that to make sure that we are, in fact, issuing appropriate violations.
How does it work with campus police, for example, which is sort of what we were thinking about in this case?
Campus police, and we welcome them enforcing parking on campus property. However, we do not welcome them enforcing parking on government streets, on DC government public streets. The university parking, yes. Our jurisdiction, no, because of the training, because of the technology, those issues.
So right now, the people, the folks trained to write tickets include DPW, Department for Hire Vehicles, and MPD.
And DDOT.
And DDOT, but DDOT doesn't tend to use their ticketing enforcement, from what I can tell.
They tend to use their enforcement powers.
Oh, where do they do
They
it?
have it. They have moving and parking authority.
Right.
They've got more authority than we do.
What about Housing Authority Police? What about other police forces in the District of Columbia?
In my past life as a prosecutor, I know Zoo Police had the parking authority, and there were some other smaller police forces, but they tend not to use it. We wouldn't necessarily see violations from them frequently, but occasionally we would.
Zoo parking use, zoo
Yes,
police?
That's one that comes to mind.
Didn't
And the
even know
federal
Zoo had one.
federal police also have ticket writing privileges.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the reasons why we were thinking campus police could be. I'd like to understand better, it doesn't have to be today, but understand better particular concerns about why another police department wouldn't make sense, given that they also go through a lot of training, but I think that we don't have to do that today necessarily. Did you give me the FY 25 to date overtime? I interrupted you. I
No,
thought.
I only provided you 2024, but
You-
we can get that for you.
Great. So, one of the drivers has to be the nightlife task forces, yes?
I'm sorry.
One of the reasons for overtime is it the nightlife?
That's
task
that's
forces?
correct. Yes, and that's on Friday nights and Saturday nights, and also on holidays.
What's interesting about that is it sort of drives a wedge in your point about equity or equality, because here we have, what, 3 neighborhoods that are getting special treatment a couple nights a week. And I would argue that they need it. One of them is my ward, so this is not me saying stop doing it. We like that you do it. But it seems kind of similar to what we're trying to do here, which is to say, if identified at a place that needs more parking enforcement for a particular reason, we're doing it through overtime and it's working. And that is in some ways what inspired this bill.
Well, the difference is that the overtime is not paid by a public entity. Overtime is from our budget. So there's no public or private company or private entity that's paying for that overtime. So I don't know how that would look, with,
Yeah. Well, we know how it looks with MPD reimbursable detail. And I think the way it looks is that sometimes there aren't enough officers available. And so the detail isn't fully implemented. And that's just a reality right now. And that could potentially be the case if we did this, that you might not always have people who are available to do it.
that's what we're afraid of,
Yeah.
yes. That we won't have available pool of people willing to work the overtime.
Let's say we create the program and at the end of the day, there aren't enough people to work the program. I don't know that that's still enough of a downside to me, that sometimes it wouldn't be fully implemented.
Well, I believe that, when you have an entity who is paying for a service and I don't have anyone to provide that service, then, how does that make us look at the end of the day? So I would want to make sure that we're able to provide the service than to, say that we can provide the service and can't.
Yeah, understood. And I appreciate that very much. And if it were up to me, you would have all the people you needed all the time. And the reality is just there may not be all the people that you want to hire or need to hire, even if you have the funding. Although I wouldn't suggest you have all the funding you need yet either. But one of the ways to think about this as we move forward is, in some ways, what this bill would do is have some of the private actors who were contributing to the traffic and the violations paying for the enforcement. Now, that's not to say that we blame bids or we blame Main Streets or we blame neighborhood entities for it, but they are helping create the vibrancy in that area that's leading to the need to enforcement. So I'm trying to create this argument for its feasibility and for how we think about who the contracting entities would be. Of course, bids are a quasi-governmental entity formed by the government. So let's just keep that part of the conversation open. Back to our PEO coverage. Are PEOs ever assigned to a beat for a very small area with lots of curbside turnover, like a couple blocks?
Yes, ma'am. We have, in fact, and oftentimes we've created what we consider a saturation beat, meaning we will have a regular PEO that will have a regular beat in that area, which may entail 6 by 6 blocks or 10 by 12 blocks. But then within that same beat, we will create a smaller saturation beat, which only entails maybe 2 or 3 blocks, so that we can have double lapsed coverage in that particular trouble area.
Great. And where would be some of those right now?
We have done it, and this is usually during the warmer weather down in the southwest waterfront. We would perform a saturation beat down there as a part of the Capital One enforcement areas. The beats that we have set up down there primarily saturation beats where individuals are going over top of each other to make sure that we have adequate coverage.
Okay. Is DPW open to a reimbursable detail program for parking enforcement if some of the concerns are addressed?
I think if we look at some of the concerns and we're able to address some of these concerns, I think that we would more than likely look at, what that would look like at the end.
Yeah.
But it would, we really want to make sure that we're going to, if this were to happen, that we would be able to provide the services.
Understood. So in light of that, you're familiar with the MPD reimbursable detail program, I believe. How might the administration of an RDO program for parking enforcement need to differ from MPD's program?
So the difference with the MPD program is, one, they have a greater pool of people to pull from. The second thing is that their program is really focused mainly on a business specific detail, whereas in this case we're talking about an area specific detail. So it's different in that sense.
So if you had people on overtime deployed for a specific area like this, is it that you feel like under your mission, folks would need to be focused not only on the commercial corridor, but also the residential blocks around?
Well, it would depend on what the entity is requesting.
I see.
Yeah.
So it may be that DPW would want to be very active in setting parameters about what services are actually offered.
Absolutely.
Yeah, understood. I do hear your desire to create an equitable model while also upholding the values and the reputation of the agency. And I share that desire. My experience representing Ward 1, which is such a compact ward, is that oftentimes there is a great desire for residential enforcement overnight because you have visitors to the area parking in RPP when they are not permitted to do so. And so actually, I think that is not a bad thing, that that's also a priority that you wouldn't want to see diminished with a program like this. All right, let's see. This is so interesting to me. So MPD's public information indicates that their RDO officers are supposed to oversee traffic control on the public space areas, streets, sidewalks, and alleys during a club's opening and closing. Which, traffic control, arguably, that's not you. But the parking violations related to traffic control very much in your turf. So I thought that was interesting and also perhaps a better role for DPW, but I don't know if you have thoughts on that particular role that the RDO plays.
I do not at this time. We have not had a conversation with MPD, so it's kind of hard to answer that question right now.
if a program like this were to come together, who do you think should be eligible for the program beyond businesses, bids, and main streets?
Well, that's the $1,000 question. Because if you provide it to one entity and then another entity who wants the same services but cannot afford it, are you providing equitable services, right? But I'm thinking that if we roll this out, it should be rolled out, and there should be a discussion as to who should be able to sign up for this program.
I am just thinking out loud a little bit, not exactly sure who else would want to do it or be able to do it. And you're right, you have to be able to afford it. Part of the MPD program is it's partially subsidized by ABCA. We'd have to think about that piece of it, but it has to be an entity that can manage a contract. So it's not as though you probably wouldn't have, for example, a homeowners association or a neighborhood association doing it, which I think is why we contemplated it being bids, main streets, people with professional staff. But anybody else come to mind for you? Any other entity that we aren't thinking of that sort of manages public space or commercial areas?
I'm thinking about pretty much along the same lines as you.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other group that might be able to provide, use this service.
Maybe Mr. Hainsworth has an idea.
One other entity that I had thought about, or we had thought about and discussed, was AOBA, the Apartment Owners Builders Association.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. We believe that they would probably be interested in attempting to obtain our services. They usually come together as an association to represent the apartment owners and businesses in the area. And it sounds like something that they would probably try to approach us about.
Okay. That's a good flag. I didn't go in order, but I may have gotten to everything. Let me take a look. Okay. You know me, I get off on a tangent, and sometimes it gets me where we need to go, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. In his testimony, Mr. Robinson recommended automated curbside enforcement. DPW is already authorized by law to use automated parking enforcement. It was included in the Street Sweeping Improvement Enforcement Act of 2008. Has automated parking enforcement been implemented? Is that something you've looked at implementing or expanding upon?
We as a department have not looked into that. I believe that Department of Transportation has taken the lead on that. Since we are the ones who are doing the enforcement, they would manage the curbside program. So I believe it's the Department of Transportation.
Thank you. We can follow up with them.
Years ago, we did implement automated ticket enforcement with the sweepers. So when the sweepers were doing their street sweeping, if a vehicle was blocking, a ticket would be issued. That was at least about 15 years ago. So I think the quality of the picture may be better now.
Yeah.
And the technology has improved, but we did do a pilot about 15 years ago with the street sweepers.
Did the pilot, was it successful? Is it something you'd want to bring back?
Well, I would say toward the end of the pilot, we had more compliance with the no parking during street sweeping areas. It was a rough start, but toward the end of the pilot, we gained more compliance.
What would it take to bring it back?
That I don't know.
Money.
Obviously, yes, but beyond that, I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I really love license plate readers in general. I think throwing them on as many municipal vehicles as we can is great, but that's even one step further, and I like that a lot. All right, and just while you have me, what other tools should we consider to help your team deploy parking enforcement staff more efficiently?
Well, one of the things that we are doing is we are purchasing additional license plate readers. So that is one of the new tech, upgrades that we are using at this point. We have, at this point, upped the number of booters on the team. At this point, we're up to 18 booters so that we're able to cover the city much better. We were able to purchase additional tow trucks. So we are upping our fleet. So those are the things that we're doing right now.
Makes me happy to hear. I love seeing all those dollars implemented. Very good. I want to thank you all for your testimony. And I'm going to say one more thing about the other bill before we wrap up. I would typically now be moving on to questions for government witnesses for the second bill on the agenda, the Owners Act. However, the Bowser administration made the decision not to send anyone to participate in the hearing today, despite my repeated requests and the fact that the bill has obvious implications for DLCP. The Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development has provided written testimony, and I'm told the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection may as well, but it's a significant barrier to the public input process if these agencies do not show up to the hearing, particularly given the testimony we heard earlier this morning. I'll be sending post-hearing questions to these agencies, and their answers will be entered into the public record. My questions for DLCP include inquiries about the services they provide businesses, how they work with the Department of Small and Local Business Development, and what type of data they collect on businesses. These questions are critical to understanding the impact of this bill and determining how the committee will move forward. I hope the agency will be more forthcoming in their written responses than they have been with today's hearing. With that, this concludes today's hearing. I thank you all for your participation. For those who have wished to submit written testimony, please do so by submitting it on the council's hearing management system. The record for this hearing will close at 5 p.m. on December 25th, 2024. The time is now 11:14 a.m. and the hearing is adjourned.